Hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming this evening. My name is Fiona Boundy. I am part of the Cultural Services team at Milton Keynes Council. It's really a great opportunity, and thank you so much to MK Gallery and Bettina for inviting me to have an in-conversation this evening about her Public Art Commission. What we're going to do is we're going to talk through various kinds of aspects of the commission and so on and so forth, but I thought I'd start with an introduction to Bettina's practice as an artist. So her practice incorporates lots of different mediums, so from sound, installation, large-scale environmental works and public art commissions. I think one of the most important characteristics of her work is the use of language and how she uses text in order to really explore place, time and people. So obviously Bettina has been working on this commission for a period of time, and obviously in terms of Milton Keynes and public art, it has an incredibly illustrious and important history, and I think this commission in particular is a great example of how artists now work in response to place and work in response to people. And I think for me, I started to work in Milton Keynes working on a number of different public art commissions, and if you look at the sort of history, you've got a moment in time where lots of artworks were developed in order to really think about and how to really evoke and create a sense of place. And now, moving forward, how artists really collaborate and participate with communities in order to develop artworks. And I think this is a really interesting example, this particular project, of how an artist can engage on lots of different levels with a particular community at a particular time. So what we're going to do is, I think, in terms of public art and the commissioning process, just a little bit about the funding. I mean, Milton Keynes is so lucky to have what we call Section 106, which is whenever there's a new development in the city, a percent of that total development cost goes towards public art commissioning. Now, that's pretty unique. It doesn't happen everywhere. Obviously, it comes with certain constraints and caveats, but ultimately, there's a real opportunity going forward for the city to grow its public art collection. It already has a collection, I think, of 260 public artworks. But going forward, we're looking at working with artists in lots of different ways. And I think what's interesting for me as a curator is how the city is almost, one of the best examples of how a civic institution, as a city in itself, has really embraced the use of public art going forward. So in terms of the context of this commission, we're looking at Claridge Park in terms of the images that are rolling along in front of you, which for me, I went actually the other day because I hadn't seen the artwork installed, and it's a particular, it's a pretty special place. It's very close to Middleton and indeed Milton Keynes village, so the original village of Milton Keynes. And I think I was really struck, when we were talking before about Claridge Park and how a lot of the residents talked about a Nordic feel, but also a seaside feel. It absolutely has that feeling about it. Whether it is the colour palette or the certain architectural features, it's a very particular and unique development. So I think moving forward, I've got a few questions that I'd like to ask Bettina about the work. And firstly, I think for me, I was very interested when looking at this particular project, the relationship between the public and the private, because you've really, in working with the residents and asking them to create a very personal and poetic name plug, you've actually created this amazing portrait of a community. And I wanted to ask you, what led you to that? What was the beginning of the process?
Yeah, sure. So the beginning of the process was being invited to deliver this commission, and it's a commission by MK Gallery on behalf of Middleton Parish Council and Milton Keynes Council, and it is a Section 106 commission, which means that the developer of this new housing development has been obliged to set a little bit of money aside for a public art project. They don't want to manage the project themselves. They then look for the appropriate partners, to MK Gallery this time, to select an artist, and I'm delighted to say that that was me. Of course, I responded to a brief. The brief was to create a permanent piece of work for Claridge Park, which is the new development. So it was the actual site was very determined. So I went on a site visit, and the other requirement, apart from that piece being permanent, was that there was some community engagement. There was a way of reaching out to the community built into the project. I guess the site itself is like you say, it's next to Milton Keynes Village. I come from Cambridge. I kind of knew, I knew villages were incorporated into the modern city of Milton Keynes. But of course, arriving here, I couldn't believe to see the Swan and the Swan pub and this chocolate box English village, beautifully preserved in the middle of Milton Keynes. And then, of course, this new development, which had these rather far-flung architectural references. I wasn't sure whether it was Seaside or New England or Jane Austen, or it had all these it was obviously the new development in the old village, trying to, on the one hand, adapt, and on the other hand, having certainly its own identity as well, with these rather fanciful architectural features. There's clapboard and there's porticos, and there is, you can see dormers and balconies. There's a lot going on. And so the idea of continuing in a way the sort of aspirations of the developer in some ways, and doing something with all the houses and offering people the opportunity to create an extra bit for their house, but then on the other hand very much wanting people to create a personal, to sort of get to the people who are actually in this estate, who are living here. And there were a few things. The actual development is in Far Home, and there were street names called Great Pasture. And so I think the naming itself, sort of got me going.
Very
of course, being a text, yes, but sort of being a text person, I thought perhaps this was the way of reaching out to people who had just come to the village, and the idea of migration. I migrated from the Netherlands here. I know what it is to reinvent yourself and to find a new place and to introduce yourself and to be at home, and it takes a lot of adaptation, and yet you want to show something of your previous life. So I thought maybe these house name plaques could have, it's almost like it's like your name badge, an introduction to each other and to the new sort of, to the community this new development is having to embed itself in.
And how did you, because I think obviously in going to a new place and trying to engage people, how did you reach them? How did you find them?
It was a bit tricky because the actual space hasn't got a community. There's 120 households in Claridge Park. But there is no community space. Of course, right next to the corner is Milton Keynes Village Hall, which is lovely and beautiful. But there was I worked with Katie Fields, who is in the audience here, as project manager at MK Gallery. We agreed that perhaps we really wanted to be in Claridge Park. We didn't want to invite people to come and talk to us elsewhere. So we decided to set up a table in January outside, offer hot chocolate, leaflet people, and invite everybody, every household in Milton Keynes, in Claridge Park, to come and see us and talk about this idea of creating a house name plaque for their house. And I think I was sure to make it clear, although this was quite a delectable offer, I did immediately want to say that there was a shared collective process of arriving at the name, so it wasn't a complete
okay, so it's clear from the beginning
that there was a process to follow, which was shared by everybody. So these plaques would have both a collective identity and, obviously be your own house plaque.
Yes.
Yeah. So we did an open table event and had a table and then we had an open door event. Did it again. And then we pulled out all the stops and we came around with musicians to try and engage the community. And every time, again, we realized that the people who engaged with us were the people who were right in front of us, because wherever we pitched, the people around the few houses, the immediate people came out the doors and spoke to us. So we did several events, and in the end also did a lot of door-to-door calling. Sort of
and have you
ringing doorbells, and then that's private and public thing is because you feel a little bit embarrassed ringing people's doorbell, and of course they say, "Well, sorry, I'm just putting the kids to bed, come back later," or it's quite, you are on that threshold then. So it's a matter of inviting, of being quite clear about what it is you're doing. Once you got talking to people, it was easier, but there was also a bit of, hang on a minute, we get lots of callers here. So. And
have you adopted to those similar strategies of engagement in other works?
Yeah. Yes, so it's one of the things. I mean, there's some slides here. Here's even you song. There's some of the slides, not all of the slides are from the Near Home project. This is in Peterborough. This was a project where I created with a writer and a musician a new evensong. And the libretto of the evensong was derived from interviews with 12 local couples in Peterborough who we asked whether they could envisage travelling to the moon. It was at the time where the Mars Foundation sent out a call out for a mature couple to travel to Mars. This was a real-time call out, and a real-life call out. People signed up. There's lots of people on the waiting list for this no-return trip. So we thought that was an interesting given in relation to the architecture of the cathedral, which has got, obviously that perpendicular idea. And so the interviews were the
libretto.
Yeah, became the libretto. We used that, and I often ask people for contributions to a project, either sound contributions. There's a project here which will come around of sound waves for a road project on the acoustic barrier. So we asked people to contribute sound, which was then made into a sound contribution, which was then visualized on the barriers and also made available as a soundtrack, or engage people in word association in order to create a collective word composition, or sometimes I ask access to public art projects. Usually there's a site, but if it's a project which I instigate myself, the negotiation of using a public space. So I'll have to ask people sometimes whether I can use their land. There's a project here of a project in about coastal erosion. There's some flags there's always negotiation with the people who live
we'll touch on that a bit more. Yeah, that sort of negotiation. And I think so. Once you'd kind of gone through this very intense process, and I really feel for you, having been in those similar situations with artists. It is a challenge to when you go in cold and you don't necessarily have roots in how you get people to kind of go, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to do that. But evidently you did very successfully. And once you had, what was your starting point? Because obviously in terms of some of this is a great example. What was the process of getting to these names with the residents?
Yes, so once if people came to see us with our hot chocolate and our proposal of a free house name plaque, and then I explained that there was a process in order to arrive at the name. I arranged to come and see people, so I made these house visits, and I would call at the arranged time, and I would have a very simple process. I would have 4 questions for people, and the answers to those 4 questions would be written down on pieces of paper, and a combination of 2 of the words would be the name. So all of these names are made up of 2 words. And these questions had something to do with where people came from, why they were here, and where else they would like to be, or where they would like to escape to. So I asked the answer to the first question was your previous address, which is very simple. And then there was a question of, in a single word, what drew you to Claridge Park? The name of your first family pet, that was the rogue kind of question, which threw up some nice names. And then a memorable holiday, and a lot of people from this new development also went on holiday back to their home country. So there were Frenchmen who went back to France, and there are people who came from Lebanon back to Lebanon. So a lot of those holiday destinations were also home.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so there were those were the questions I asked. I mean, I had a little envelope, and people wrote it down in pieces of paper, and then picked two, and if those two were the right ones, then that was it, and if otherwise you could swap. So there was quite a lot of negotiation. And then there was a tricky moment of the actual naming, and yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think in the exhibition and listening to some of the recorded conversations between you and the residents. I mean, I was really struck about initially how intimate they are. That you've really gained their trust and confidence in a very short space of time, and they're kind of really telling you these very personal stories. And then there's some brilliant examples, like one couple's having a little bit of an argument about something, and then this very sort of I think intimate is the word, sort of portrait of these people having this negotiation about the naming of their homes. And I think it's really just really, was it over a cup of tea? I mean, did you see them over quite a few sort of series, or was it sort of one stop?
It was the actual naming was, and I think it's quite to sort of make that quite a little ceremony. I came to do the naming, and we did have a cup of tea, and then I would explain what it was, and I'd bring my questions out, and it is very touching. It is, I think, naming anything is naming your house or your pet, or it's a big moment, isn't it? So. But the questions I asked were very simple. They weren't intrusive questions in a way. I think they were very straightforward questions, and yet they are very personal. It was also a little bit like people give, it had a sense of those password things as well, isn't it?
Yes.
They are normal, but they're personal to you, so do you give them away? So there was a bit of that.
But there was a beautiful, as well, lots of examples where people really understood that playing with language, playing with words. And the magic of that was kind of taken up really quickly. Yeah. It seemed that people were like, oh yes, the potential poetry of that juxtaposition.
Yes, the juxtaposition of the words, because actually, in a way, it is quite a limited. You are having to really focus on those few words you've got, and how they are put together. And of course, they are meaningful to people because they have ingredients that are very personal to them. And so it is a matter of finding the right expression.
Absolutely, and I think they were all incredibly moving and beautiful. And the what is it? I can never say.
Asfortier,
which was a beautiful example of a family, and it's the bird that flew.
Yes, the bird that flew in Arabic.
And there was a little bit was a slight hesitation because obviously in using that particular name, it sort of obviously hinted at the ethnicity of the family within, but that they felt because it was Milton Keynes that it was okay. They would not sort of. It was okay to name that.
Yes, it was. When I arrived, they said, "Well, look, we've got a name already. It's the Fig and Olive." I said, but we have to go through the process." Okay then. And then Asfortier came out, and they said. They were they were worried a little bit that would sort of signify their ethnicity, and then they thought it's okay. But that particular family actually became really, really a fan of the project, which was nice. Yes, I think they did actually embrace the. But yes, I recorded all the naming conversations, and the exhibition next door in the project space. Some of the audio is you can listen to the edited conversations. They are very moving. But I think they were very straightforward questions, and I think it's quite interesting. It sounds quite a mechanical process, how it can throw up quite evocative. It's still quite evocative for it, so I think that's really interesting.
It is. And I was just wondering a little bit more about that negotiation, because we talk so much, on lots of different levels, when you are working within the public realm with people as sort of collaborators or participants, how you reached a point where you felt that what was represented through the name plaques was right for your work as an artist, but also right in terms of representing what the residents wanted.
Yeah, I know. It is a bit of toing and froing, isn't it? And it's just staying there, so there's a little bit of saying, what about this, and then seeing whether people embrace that idea, or they come up with something, and you think, but what about that? So but people in the end have to embrace it, and then once they have found the right expression, and it has to be agreed by both. I can't come up with something that people don't want on their houses. That's not right. On the other hand, I've got a sort of, I guess there is an artistic intent from my point of view that I would like it to be a resonant expression. So it is difficult, but I think you have to be prepared for a few. It's just what it is. You know, and I think the process. I'm quite interested in this process of having quite a mechanical.
But it actually opens up.
But it opens up somehow. Somehow it frees. You don't start off thinking, oh my God, I need to be terribly poetic now. You start off with very simple.
And it just comes.
Yeah, it sort of allows, I think, a little bit of.
I think was there one? Was it Porto Dystopia? Was that the
Porto Dystopia?
Yeah. Was there a few that you were just like? Did you have to give up on some people, or
that was a tricky one? They were actually quite fearless because it was. I think it was Puerto homelessness first, or homeless harbour. I thought that was all right as well, homeless harbour, because the reason for coming to Milton Keynes, they said, was because they were homeless. And
they wanted to.
Yes, and actually they had a very good. It could also have been Puerto Begonias or something,
Okay.
So they could have gone in the sort of the easy
maybe
way.
Different directions.
But the homelessness, they then said, they were quite critical of Milton Keynes as well, and they've been, so the dystopia bit was important for them. I said, but it will be your house plug, it will be furniture fixed on the house.
Yeah.
I said, well, that's what I am. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there was a bit of negotiation there. I think I did worry a bit about them initially.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I guess I was thinking, that lineage of within sort of public art in terms of text. When you think of Holzer or Kruger or Hamilton Finlay or Hamish Fulton, obviously those are very kind of diverse examples. But for you, Bettina, in relation to that sort of placing of text in the public realm, whether it is this much more of a sort of philosophical, poetic approach rather than overtly political, or, obviously you were giving quite sort of that collaboration. People could have made a very political house name if they'd wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stop Brexit.
Yes, of course the process maybe, yes.
Well, that wouldn't have worked with your questions.
If your pet was Brexit or something, or maybe you moved there to stop Brexit. I don't know quite how that would have worked out exactly. So it precluded perhaps using very specific words unless they were in there. But no, the political kind of side of it, I do believe that. Did you mention Jenny Holzer, Barbara Kruger? There is an element of protest, isn't there? I believe that the feminist side of things, that the personal is the political. I believe very much there's a bit of wearing your heart on your sleeve with these kind of house names, isn't there? I think that's a very valid thing. And the kind of text that's available in public, you'd be amazed how narrow I think it really is. What can be said in the public realm or what can be stated in the public realm is very closely guarded. So the more of the personal is out there and embraced, I think the more the better. And of course there's this whole idea of the left-wing kind of thing. So there's a political edge, that they sort of act locally and think globally, to emphasize the diversity of this community, where it's all come from, where it might like to go, and yet it's a very local project. So those sort of things do go through my mind. And and the whole idea of reflecting reality. There is it is outside of the gallery. It is sort of out in the public realm, and sort of giving a voice to the people who might not normally be represented in the public realm is important to me. But then there is also this idea that there is, in the art side of things, there is a bit of editing required. It's not just a reflection of reality. There's a mirror, isn't there, which has got a bit of a slant. I suppose you're trying to reflect something back, which is just not quite. So it's trying to get the play on words and the artistry out as well.
Well, I think with the conversations when you were sort of making sort of suggestive interventions during that process. In a sense, that was, you were really adding and sort of moulding and shaping how they respond. It was very, you could see your vision of in there within that narrative really clearly, sort of drawing out certain, or think about this, or what about that, and to get to that end point.
Yeah, it is interesting though, I think. I mean, in a way, we did use the word. We did stick. I think it was important to stick with the rules in a way as we set up.
Not divert too much.
Not divert too much, and see what these words say to you, or you can just shift them a little bit, or it is in the juxtaposition. I'm very inspired by Kenneth Goldsmith, using language as a material, and this whole idea that perhaps just the editing or the existing language can be used rather than having to create. His book is called uncreative writing, uncreative language, uncreative writing. So that using what's in front of you, but then that's got so many associations and can be seen. And language is quite slippery. It just takes a little bit of tweaking, and it says something quite evocative. And there has to be a moment in this naming thing that people just say, yes, that's my name.
That's right.
That's my name. And then once they decided that I couldn't say that, but they would, in all of the audios, you can also hear them saying for the first time, and trying that word and saying, yes, that's us, that sounds right. And then when they get to that point, I say, okay, so what colour would that be? So you enforce, and then what typeface, how would you see that? And then we get to the point that I had a piece of paper, a little catalogue, and they could write it on, and just sort of going a bit in my developers.
Yes, a sort of pseudo developer.
Yeah, so and they could, and nobody withdrew. There was also a lot of time, I didn't want people to feel pushed in it, and so there was a lot of time before then they were made, and then they were installed, and then we had a launch. So there were a lot of moments in which people could have said, look, I'm actually not going ahead. Sure. But nobody did. They did, once they got there, they embraced the name. Yeah. And they had it installed permanently on their house.
Touch on that in a little bit, but do you think, because obviously originally you trained as an art historian and letter cutter, and does that still feed in to your work now?
I imagine it does. The lettering obviously is there. I then go and do my very best to create a nicely laid out plaque for them, and the plaques were made in enamel. I went to AJ Wells in Isle of Wight, they're on the Isle of Wight, and worked in a factory. So I think my craft, or my lettering craft, is in there in the creation of it. The art historian, I think I do take a very broad view of where this community is in time. I think I'm trying to think where it's come from and what it is now and where it's going. Yeah.
Well, I think that leads on to your point about the fact that the name plaques will always stay with the houses. They won't leave with the residents. And I think when you look at the images of the kind of post-unveiling picnic and also people standing with their homes and the plaques, there's this amazing sort of sense of absolutely a moment in time where you've captured a portrait of a community through this collaborative text almost, but that will change and they will move on, but those homes will always be called that name.
Some people will wonder what on earth were people thinking. But yes, I think that's only right, isn't it? I mean, house names are attached to houses. You don't take your house name, but that took a little while for people to sink in that perhaps they were going to be fixed permanently and they weren't going to go. People did want to take them, and then, I think it slowly, because the process was so long, there were a lot of conversation then, and then saying, well, no, it will be fixed permanently, you can't take it. And you're the first kind of set of people living in this, you've given this house,
You've named
you're the first, a lot of people were the first kind of inhabitants of these houses. You've named it, and that's.
And now there's an aspiration to name the place as a final gesture.
Yeah, I guess not. Obviously, there were 120 households. There are 80 houses and 40 flats. The flats were a little bit harder to reach. You had to get past the door kind of buzzer thing. So although we put lots of posters out, didn't we? They were a bit harder to reach. We had one apartment taking part as well. But where am I going? I was just
thinking because Bettina has an aspiration to make a fantastic, large, wonderful site.
Yeah, so because not everybody took part in the end, I did. I have designed a village sign which says something about the home idea, which is so close to home, isn't it? But the home, H-O-L-M-E, which is interestingly, it's both a I've got the dictionary definition is somewhere in the slides. It's both an islet in a river or in a bay, and it's also the dip, the pond at the side of the river, the sort of water meadow, the low-lying land which will fill with water. So it's both it's both an island and a pond at the same time, the word home, and it sort of obviously sounds like a home. So the village sign has got an islet in a bay and a meadow on the shore, those two
combined.
Yeah. So, and that is still waiting for planning permission, so hopefully that will find a space in the green space in front of the development, which... Yes. We haven't really. That was, in a way, when the commission came up, a focus for the location of a permanent piece. But because it's been very contested, that the developer had, I did see the sort of, the developer had presented it to the new community as a traditional your village green.
The village green.
Where you play cricket and where you can have a leisurely time. And when it came to it, they put a playground on it. And the local community was up in arms, saying that there was too much.
Too invasive.
Too invasive, and kids were hanging out, this and the other. So they pulled the community made the developer pull it all up again. And after that bit of grass was just left. Nobody seemed to even know who owned it after a while. So that piece of land
it still
has been sitting, and I think in a way I ended up using the houses as a site for my permanent public art piece because the green space was so
the hot
potato, and also so ill, and nobody knew who owned it, so it was very difficult to actually put a permanent piece on it. So, but now we seem to have gone a bit farther. We've gone through the whole project. I've designed this fitted sign, and we're going to find the person who can give us planning permission. We're still working on it to hopefully complete the project by installing that piece as well.
Yes, and I think with with that land and that sort of original sort of starting point, I think in a way, those things happen very often. That use of the public realm, whether it's for public art or for that sort of social space, and how it does become contested very easily, particularly in places where you do, the immediate is pretty high density, you've got lots of people living, so it presents lots of challenges. So I think your idea to use the houses themselves was very wise.
Yeah. Also, I think it's also it wasn't an enormous budget. It was sort of tailored to the budget, and to actually put a permanent piece on that green, whilst in the state it was in, it would have been. It needed groundworks and it needed maintenance. It wasn't the budget wouldn't stretch, but the village sign would. Hopefully, just squeeze into the budget in what's left of the budget. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll open it up. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask Bettina at this point, or indeed me?
Is it owner-occupied housing or is it social housing?
It's a mixture, but you're absolutely right. I think I was a little bit. I did the research, and it was pretty much 96% owned. There were a few social housing, and there were a few apartments, there's a housing association. What I did come up against that, of course, although it was all mostly privately owned, there were a lot of landlords who weren't there, so I rang a lot of doorbells and people say, I'm renting, I don't know whether I could put a plaque up, and I said, yes, you could, and you could speak to your landlord, but the communication between the people who were in the house and the landlord seemed to be the stumbling block. Very often a couple of people couldn't get permission from their landlords, and that made me quite sad. So that was something I hadn't quite, although I looked at the project beforehand. I thought, gosh, most people own their places, so they will be able to decide. But of course, although they're owned, they're not so they're landlords, absentee landlords. So that was a slight problem. But there are, it's a mixture of things. I think it's 60% unaffordable housing and 40% affordable housing. So yeah.
But obviously the new owners don't have to keep Porto Dystopia, do they?
Well, they will have trouble getting the plug off.
It's very hard glue, is it? Very hard glue.
Yeah. No, it's seriously installed. They are pins in the back of the plug and glued in. You can, if you're really determined, slide a blade at the back and sort of, it's not completely impossible, but they're pretty firmly fixed.
Can I just ask you, please? I'm sorry. It obviously builds identity initially through the people from each house, but did you feel a collective identity got developed? Were people talking to each other?
Yeah, I think they did. And after, several events where people would meet up again, I think people did say to me, it's nice because we've been looking out for the other plugs and sort of wondering what people... I think it did create a bit of a talking point. A narrative, yeah. Yeah, and people said they'd gone to find them all and look for the others. And so I think it did a bit, yeah. And I sort of followed, they all got a certain, there's 5 cultures, so, there's all the similarity and the difference. So people, I think, felt there's sort of, I think so.
Yeah. My question is just about the fact that I'm sure it's part of how you present it in the process, but they're all 2 words except for one which has 3.
Oh yeah, they've got the haven't they? The ride home.
Yeah.
The ride home. The ride home. Yeah.
But the 2 is your way of getting them to put 2 ideas together, because I know I would, I wonder if anybody wants to use 1 word or 4.
Yeah, I guess it was a way of creating a few parameters, not making it too kind of varied in a way. I do like the juxtaposition of 2 words. I think you can do quite a bit with it. It was a way of, you set up this kind of system and hopefully it works, and it's something to keep working with as you go on. So I didn't want to change it once I got started, and then I thought it worked. I think a house name with 4 words is quite a lot, isn't it? So
I was thinking traditionally they're mostly 1 word.
Yeah, but I think you can do a lot more with 2.
Sure. I was curious about whether everyone sort of agreed to it.
Yeah, no, I think those sort of things I think about a lot before you start something like this. What do you set up? Because once you set it up, you're only going to get back what it's sort of, you have to live with it then. So I think very carefully about what would be about right. And then the white home. You're right, it's got the "de", hasn't it? If you listen to the audio, there's the kids in that house saying the white home, the white home. I think it's something to do with the White House, isn't it? That's what's in their house, in their mind. So I didn't want to say you can't have the white, so it sort of slipped in there. It slipped in, yeah.
Exactly.
It should have been White Home, really.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it? It's a bit. You have to take the rough with the smooth a little bit, because to some extent you can't predict what's coming out, and sometimes you're stuck with a bit of. But yes, I think in a way that the slipped in. You're right. Yeah.
Before I ask my question, I'm very impressed with the number of families you got involved.
Thank you.
It is so difficult. Everyone wants to, but no one wants to put the time in. And to be able to achieve that many plaques without pointing a gun to their head. Very impressive.
The truth is, we worked very, very hard. We thought we would be doing one event, the open table event. We did the open table, the open door, and the open roof event. We had our musicians. We had, I think, 4 goes at ringing doorbells. Had hot chocolate. Yeah, we had
hot
a lot
dog,
of hot dogs. And then the door-to-door thing in the end was what. Thank you. It was we gave it our all to.
So my question is now that the project is complete, and you kind of, with hindsight, how you've done it differently? what would you have changed?
I think what you were picking up on, the home ownership, I was slightly uncomfortable thinking, have I just made a project for homeowners? I was a bit thinking, what about the people who rent houses? And there was nothing to stop them apart from that relationship with their landlord. But of course, again, you come up against the thing that you're not personally meeting the landlord. The landlord get an email from their, you have people saying, can we name your house? And they probably think, I don't know. So it was the distance there. In principle, it would have been possible. And also with the apartments, there was nothing to stop people having plaques on the outside of their apartment. And yet, they were just a bit harder to reach. I don't know what I could have done about it. With hindsight, I don't know how I could have involved the landlords. They are so far away. I don't know how I could have dealt with it. But it was something that was slightly unforeseen. I came up against that difficulty of a lot of people opening the door saying, I would love to, but I'm renting this place.
Well, what about the option of it not being quite so permanent?
Yes, and I offered, yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, I did offer people, if you're renting and you don't want it permanent, but say to your landlord, we'll just put a couple of screws in your house and we just hang it over. It's not safe, but the chances that somebody will take it are very small. We'll do that. So I did offer that, but I think people found it very difficult. And I did design a plaque for, so I went as far as designing it and getting it all ready. They were still trying to reach the landlord, and it didn't happen. I was very sad about that. I don't know what I could have done about it.
Without actually going to visit the landlord, but that would
yes. I think that was the difficulty. They were so difficult to even get. They didn't communicate very much, it seemed, with the people who were in their houses.
Or just going through the estate agent's property.
Yes, going to estate agent. Has it been passed on, the message or not? It was very difficult. And I also tried the developers because they were the housing association for the apartment blocks. I think I tried to communicate with them, but that was difficult. I didn't get anywhere.
And how long was the time frame from the commission to the completion? How much time was that?
About a year. We are about a year on now. I think a year and 3 months, maybe the sort of initial interviews and discussion of how the project would work out. It's a bit over a year. The first engagement with the community was in January. So quite quick, actually.
Yes, it is. These things take often quite a long time. Yeah. I had one quick question that I meant to ask earlier. Was when you engaged the families and the residents and so forth, did they ask you about your work as an artist? Was that part of the conversation? Your sort of other...
No, they didn't. No, I kept saying it's an art project, and they knew that.
And were they curious? Did they ask why it was happening there and to them?
Yes, they did ask where the money came from.
Right.
I think my role as an artist, I think I sort of took the mantle of the salesperson, developer, sort of mystic, turning up with my kind of... and I think because I kept saying this is an art project, obviously people realized, yes. And then there was we had a kids workshop here, we made pillowcases. We asked kids to create a name for their alter ego, so we did the same process. So the art thing with MK Gallery, of course, being involved became quite clear, and now there is an accompanying show, obviously, next door, so people can see the whole process reflected, through the prism of art. I've made a film, and they've got their designs on the wall. So I think, obviously,
they understand.
It's become clear, but nobody has. I don't think I particularly I was kind of a bit hidden as the artist. Okay. I was the kind of facilitator of the name making thing.
Because I think that's something in terms of how interpretation's a funny word, but in relation to sort of taking people, or I guess that level of understanding in relation to what they're engaged in a way, that it is actually part of your practice as an artist. So I do think it's almost how you have those conversations and how you because I think if you say to people, often I say to people, oh, I work in public art, great sculpture, great. It's like, yes, that's part of it, absolutely, but it's such a wide, broad church now, and I think we are, and lots of different sort of commissions that we're working on at the moment. lots of negotiation about actually what working in the public realm is or isn't, and the fact that now sometimes it is so collaborative and so, or not in all instances, but very often that collaboration and participation, the sort of social aspect of it is super key. Did anyone? Because we were with some master then, like this guy's like, "Is that your job? Do you get paid to do that?" It's like, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But so there was that. So just understanding that you actually were an artist doing your job.
Yeah, I think people got there. It became clear, and I think people appreciated what was going on. But it took a little while. It took a little while. But people did wonder why there was a free plug on offer and where the money came from. So that was a question I did answer straight away. People in a way. No, and I think that people now are sort of the custodians of this art project. You know, I think that idea. People were, they are. I think it's sort of. But yes, there's a lot of investment in just talking to people. Sorry.
I work from home. Okay, so I get a number of knocks on the door. If it's a delivery guy, it's fine. Typical with the postman. But whether it's a fish salesman or whether it's someone who wants to repair my roof, or whether it's someone who's selling Jesus or whoever, I have a wall, a shield. That I put up. And I'm afraid to say much because I may commit myself to something. So I tend to be friendly but strong. How do you overcome that? I mean, you must have hit that almost every time you knock on the wall. This resistance. Yeah. So you have to be able to show that you're different, and you're not trying to ask for money or ask for their time.
Yeah. Well, I did say, have you heard about the art project? And I think sometimes that was like, no. But I think it was not the question that people expected, because not many art projects knock on your door. So I think it was for most people, unless people really didn't want to know about art. I think once people understood and you got talking to them, I think the fact it was a slightly different offer, and they did listen. I think there was an element of not another person at the door, and I think sometimes probably I didn't even get to talk to them. It was like, no, we don't talk. And there was sometimes it's very difficult. Some of these letterboxes say no salesman, and then they get very specific.
No art projects.
The art project was never there, but there were sort of 8 categories. No religious callers, no, so this,
door-to-door salesman.
I would just be scanning. Am I one of those categories, and decide that it was all right to call for an art project. So I think I did actually introduce. I did say there's an art project.
That was your opening gambit.
Yes. Have you heard about the art project you can participate in? And I very quickly say you're invited to create a free house name plaque. Yeah. So there was a bit of the sort of free
gift for you.
The gift thing for you. Yeah. But it was a funny moment. I think it was slight trepidation to kind of knock on all the doors again, of intruding or sort of not being wanted. And then meeting some lovely people who said, that's, of course, come in, and that's great, and you want a cup of tea, and, it's very different, and some people just busy, saying, look, I'm cooking, and the kids are screaming, I'll say, I'll come back another time. Sometimes they say, no, don't bother. So, there are enough people who really don't want to be intruded on. But I think the idea was to come up with so many different angles. So I also we left a board on a stick saying, please take part, so people who didn't open the door could read it. And, we had different, and then the musicians, people maybe who wanted to talk to us because of that, or the chocolate, or the biscuits, so we had lots of different ways. Try different ways. Yeah.
How people started using the names in their actual postal addresses?
You can actually, you can register properly by at the post office, and then your mail goes to the White Home in Middleton. I don't know if they have actually. I haven't talked to him about it. I had one moment where I thought I'm going to register. I'm going to offer that I'm registering it for them, but it's quite you need to sort of hand over details, which I'm not really sort of meant to know, I suppose. So I think it's a little bit more tricky than that. People have to do it themselves. But you picked up with your critical text on the halfway through the project. Of course, people started saying, "Do you know this can actually
increase the
value of your home?" There was this article in Good
Housekeeping.
Yes, but only if you pick the right name.
Yes. Yes.
What dystopia?
So I try to stay clear of that, but if you do register it and it is the right name, apparently your house rockets in value. Yeah. So people,
it's like another channel for dispersing the work in a way.
Yeah.
Mail art.
Yeah. No, I was interested in it, and I did investigate whether I could offer, say to people, look, I'll register it for you, but I found out you have to hand over documents and information that I didn't read necessarily. So I can still email. I think we're coming to the end of the project, so there's still a few. I can still alert people to this possibility. But then out comes the sticky. How much is your name worth? Because the Good Housekeeping article pointed out you needed to have names which were fairly traditional.
Honeysuckle cottage.
Yeah.
Popular.
Yeah.
Pretty pretty conservative. I guess it is that sort of romantic. If you say, "Oh, I live in honeysuckle cottage," like, "Oh, lovely." So it is, sort of painting that picture with words.
I don't think you can devalue your home by putting it on. I haven't really discussed that thing with them, but yes, it is something to point out, maybe.
I think it's a nice state to choose in a sense because it's quite playful. So I would just imagine that people who came to choose a house there had a bit of sense of, this is quite fun because I love the blue. I like the blue one.
Yeah.
But I think it's because they're not all one type of house. It fits very well because it's quite individualistic.
There's not one type of house, but there's certain elements which are all the same, but they're just mirrored or put around the other side. So the design elements have just been used.
Slides, so to make it sound so they're quite special.
Yeah.
But I think at least I can imagine people going there and falling in love slightly with the character.
Oh yes, people talk about that, don't they? They're sort of, because we thought we'd always be. It feels like we're always on holiday. Somewhere like that.
So I would hope those people are more receptive to having some fun.
Yeah.
They look as though they might be having some individuality, but they would respond to this.
Any other questions while we're here? Okay, well, thank you so much, Bettina, and thank you all so much for coming. And
the exhibition next door is open tonight.
So yes, if anyone wants to,
you want to,
we can go and have a look.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's just, absolutely. The audio is a bit difficult to hear. Thank you.